I rise also in support of the legislation that is before us, but I do think it's important that we speak in real terms about the language that is in the bill that we're going to vote on, and a little bit about procedure. And I just feel compelled to rise and just express a few concerns about what is happening today. And that partly because I'm hearing my colleagues praise the document before us, and I understand that's only natural when we're going to find ourselves in certainly a strong amount of support and possibly unanimous. The first concern I would just address on this bill, and I'll note the title out of the gate, which is an act concerning funding for school lunches and a Center for Sustainable Aviation, comma, special education funding, comma, certain bottle deposits, comma, certain state positions in the posting of state job openings and bond covenant restrictions, and the budget reserve fund. That sounds like a lot of stuff. And in fact, that is indeed a lot of stuff. I would argue that this is 5 separate subject items, and that they should have been addressed as individual bills. But sadly, that's not happening today. We are being asked to vote for this as one omnibus document. The other thing is that we are here voting on something that is described as an emergency. This bill is before us as an emergency certified bill. Effectively, that means that little of any of this language that is before us has been through the committee process, has been before the public, has been raised for a hearing, has been debated by committee members. It is just being placed before us today as a collection of 5 independent ideas that we are being asked to vote on as one vote. I say this because I think that among the members here in the Senate chamber, there may be some disagreement about how we might approach each one of these individual items. I know for me, I would not support every aspect of the bill that's before us. And if you had divided it into its 5 separate pieces of subject matter, there are ones that I probably wouldn't support at all, while there are others that I would. I don't think that that is what the people that we represent expect us to be doing here. And I have concerns that not enough of my colleagues consider this an issue worth addressing, that we are not only charged with passing good policy here, but we're also charged with making sure that we follow a process and a procedure that is transparent and worthy of the people that we represent. These bills should have got a hearing. They should have had a debate. We should have had an opportunity to discuss each one individually and came up with the best possible policy in each case. And I believe that should be a concern of us, regardless of our political party. And I really want to rise just for one final reason. I'll say that the bill comes down to kind of a 51-49 for me, in the sense that sometimes you've got to weigh the good parts of a product versus the parts that you don't necessarily support to decide whether you can vote in the affirmative or not. And today I'm going to vote yes, but barely. And the reason that I'm going to vote yes is because I believe that the final piece of the bill, which is the part that has been referred to by my colleagues as the fiscal guardrails, outweighs some of the other items in the bill, which are not necessarily bad, but I think they could have been done better. What's important to me, though, is that even though I do believe that the passage of those fiscal guardrails today, and to extend them for another 5 years, is a net improvement in Connecticut's public policy. I believe that, otherwise I wouldn't be voting yes. But I also don't believe that it's such a glorious and amazing accomplishment. And I want to caution my colleagues against taking credit for where we are financially as a state. As I pointed out just recently when we voted on the most recent state union contract, we were saved. If it were not for the pandemic, if it were not for actions taken by the federal government, if it were not for mountains of money being granted to the state of Connecticut by the federal government, we would have a giant deficit, like we always do, effectively, as long as I've been here. Since 2011, we would pass a budget, And we would know on the day we were passing the budget that in the out years there was already a deficit. And sometimes that deficit was substantial. And every cycle and spending would increase regardless of that common result. And we would be in that situation today, irregardless of these amazing guardrails that were passed in the 2017 budget. I was here in 2017. I was very much part of the original Republican budget that passed both the House and the Senate, with a few Democrat members crossing over to help us. And I felt very confident in that product. And I was disappointed when Governor Malloy vetoed it at the time. And I thought it was a mistake, and I still do, that Republican leaders went back from a position of strength and agreed to put together what became known as the compromise budget, which everyone seems to be praising today from 2017. And it is true, that budget did include many of these same items, although admittedly they are being watered down little by little. And I will remind everyone that even these guardrails are statutory changes, which means effectively they have only the force of law as long as this body doesn't decide to change them, which they can do at almost any time. We could come back in a week or a month or a year or 2 years and revise this accomplishment. Now, I'm hopeful that people are here with good intent, and the reason why we're going to vote affirmatively to keep these guardrails in force is because we have every intention of doing so. But I wonder to myself whether or not over the last 5 years, had the pandemic not occurred, and had the President of the United States not engage in erratic fiscal policy, I would call it, which ended up giving us a tremendous amount of grant money and effectively saving the state of Connecticut from the deficit that we were faced, whether or not we would have actually stuck to these guardrails at the time. I don't think that budget in 2017 was fiscally responsible. I voted no on it because even though it contained these changes, which were at that time also very positive, that budget also contained a huge sum of money to bail out the city of Hartford, $550 million. It had money to spend on the XL Center. I think it was $45 million per year. It also contained one of the largest tax increases that we've ever seen since I've been here anyway, by removing what was left of the already diminished property tax credit against your income tax, $250. I don't think that was a very good budget at all. And I would just like to remind folks that when they take credit for the good, they should also take credit for what was fully contained in that budget. And that includes some very negative things, which I don't think help the state of Connecticut from a fiscal standpoint. And I'm worried that what's happening now, and I saw it when we voted on the union contract a week ago, which is that people in this building and outside of it, to the extent that they have involvement, are taking credit for the fact that we have a surplus and that we're in good fiscal shape in Connecticut. I don't think they should do that. I don't know that there's anybody here that deserves a whole lot of credit for the position we're in. Mark my words, we were saved. We were saved financially by the federal government. And I'm very concerned that if we don't recognize that now, we are going to go back down the same terrible, bad habits that we have had in the past. And Mr. President, the reason why I'm voting yes today is because as much as I don't have tremendous confidence that these guardrails are going to fix everything that's going forward, I do believe they are the best we can accomplish this very day, and certainly as members of the minority, to try and paint a better picture going forward. So I'll close just by saying that this proposal is, as I said, a net improvement, but it is not something that's going to fix everything. And please don't mistake it for something that will. And I caution everyone in this circle not to revisit the dangerous budgeting practices that put us in such fiscal difficulty over the last decade. We are very, very lucky to be in the position that we were in right now, and we should be counting our lucky stars for that. Thank you, Mr. President.